Hello and welcome back to another video from the Mike Live and 5 channel, where on today's video we're going to be doing a full tactical breakdown, full-time show on our third consecutive victory away from home. This time it was against West Ham at the London Stadium on Saturday. I'm recording this on Tuesday morning, which is a day after we uploaded our Ealing Road podcast episode, which kind of talked through all the major talking points from the game. The link for that video will be in the description of this one. Initial kind of takeaways, initial thoughts after the game. Obviously, we're going to dive into Brentford's fantastic first half, in which we should have seen ourselves go into half-time at least at 3-0. Could have been 4, could have been 5. We're going to talk through all of those talking points, but initial thoughts. It's nice to kind of shake that hoodoo of Brentford being terrible away from home and great at home. Obviously, our form's kind of gone the other way at home, with the huge caveat that we played some high-level opposition at home in recent weeks. But like I said, I mean, shaking that kind of hoodoo, going to these grounds, Palace was a tricky place to go. West Ham, another tricky place to go. I mean, there's no easy places to go in this league, you'd say, apart from the three teams that have come up. And we're going to talk about Leicester on Friday night, which should, hopefully, be our fourth consecutive win on the road. That will be a record, considering we equalled our current record against West Ham on Saturday. But, I mean, initial takeaways was that we were really good and West Ham were really, really, really bad. The title of this video, How Brentford Made West Ham Look Average, very, very apt, because I just think I was a little bit surprised with how poor Graham Potter got it tactically, especially in that first half. Considering his record against Thomas Frank in the Premier League, I would have thought that he would have set West Ham up in a way that made us struggle a little bit more against them. And especially in that first half, like I mentioned at the top, it could have, should have been 3-4-5 going into half-time, and the game should have been dead and buried before the second 45. But just before we get into the video, and we touched on this in the podcast as well, the Teams Like Brentford thing. I've seen a lot of West Ham fans on Twitter, on social media, saying, we should be rolling over teams like Brentford coming to the London Stadium. And I understand it, right? Brentford have still got, with a bus stop in Hounslow, we've got this underdog mentality, and we go into most games with that mentality. But for West Ham fans, considering our record against them in the Premier League, I think the victory on Saturday made it 8 played, 6 wins, 1 draw and 1 defeat against West Ham. So, I mean, out of any team in the Premier League, we have the best record against them. 6 wins, 1 draw and 1 defeat. So for West Ham fans to be saying, we should be beating teams like Brentford at home, if history tells us anything, you should be losing to Brentford on Saturday. And that's exactly what happened. Let's just get straight into the screenshots, mostly from the first half. I don't think I've actually got any from the second half, just because it was a pretty boring second half, if I'm being honest. But obviously, I'm going to talk about Nathan Collins, I'm going to talk about KLP and some of the defenders which made that second half boring from a West Ham point of view, but great viewing from Brentford point of view, in terms of really just eliminating their threats, whether that was Mohamed Kudus or Jared Bowen or Lucas Paqueta. Listen, our defending in that second half was it was excellent. So good. And we're going to get into that all. But yeah, just before we get going, remember to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button. And like I said at the top, if you haven't already watched the Ealing Road podcast episode, which went out yesterday, the link for that video will be in the description of this one. Without further ado, let's get into the screenshots. Another Brentford away win. Oh, it just feels good. It feels good to be winning away from home again. So this is how the two teams set up on Saturday, and where I think Graham Potter got it wrong, and we touched on it in the podcast, was not playing Evan Ferguson from the start, because it meant that Lucas Paqueta was kind of playing a false 9 role, but obviously he likes to drift into these central positions more often. So what we'd actually see, and what was really nice to see, was that even though Thomas Frank set up with that midfield 3 of Norgard, Vitali Janelt and Damsgaard, which, we've all expressed our reservations about, we were actually really high up throughout pretty much the whole game, which contributed to a lot of action in this middle third of the pitch. Paqueta was a little bit more advanced, Bowen was kind of hugging the touchline, and KLP did a great job of containing him. But all of these players, Alvarez, Kudus, Souček, Vitali Janelt, Mikael Damsgaard and Christian Norgard and Wissa, were all kind of occupying the same space in the middle third of the pitch. And where I think we had the edge over West Ham, because this area of the pitch was so congested at all times, it was so vital that Mikael Damsgaard be at his brilliant best. And Mikael Damsgaard is Mikael Damsgaard, so he was always going to be at his brilliant best. So whenever the ball was kind of being turned over in the middle third and we were getting possession of the ball, Mikael Damsgaard was just picking up these little pockets. And Thomas Souček and Edson Alvarez just could not contain him. But that threat in the midfield, and where I think Graham Potter got it wrong, was not starting Evan Ferguson from the start, because Paqueta would drift in field and then all of the action in the match was packed into this middle third of the pitch. So it was key for Brentford to win the midfield battle, and that's exactly what we did. Christian Norgard, sensational. Vitaliano, I think, is in the midst of a bit of a purple patch at the moment, and I've given him stick. A lot of other people have given him stick, but we have to give him his credit. Again, I thought he was superb on Saturday. But what they needed, West Ham, was Evan Ferguson to really stretch our defence, because what we saw most of the time was our defence really, really high up whenever we had the ball, and we wouldn't drop that far deep. And when we did drop deep and we were camped out on the edge of our box, Mikkel Damsgaard was the one that was feeding off the second balls and starting counter-attacks. But if they had Evan Ferguson on from the start, immediately you get someone that's willing to run in behind, you get someone that's willing to play off the centre halves and not wanting to drop into midfield. And as a consequence, our midfield would have dropped a lot deeper, and I actually think West Ham would have had a lot of joy, which is what they had in the second half when they brought Evan Ferguson on. But with Paqueta in there, it just made it Brentford's game, in my opinion, because we have Damsgaard who's operating that free role this season. He was able to exploit the pockets, which he's been so good at exploiting all season long. We had Aya bombing down the right, KLP bombing down the left, Sharda causing a nuisance of himself, who we're going to talk about as well, because it feels like I talk about him every week, for better or for worse. We spoke about him on the podcast, but I thought, again, today, it was one of his better performances. Lots of good off-the-ball work, which isn't something I've said about Sharda a lot, but his turnovers, especially in their defensive third of the pitch, really contributed to us controlling the game in the midfield. But just to kind of highlight that point, if you look at both teams' average heat maps in the game, you can see all of West Ham's midfield in the middle third and all of Brentford's midfield in the middle third. So that's where the game was played in that first half, and that's why it made it key that whoever was going to go on and win that midfield battle was probably going to have a lot more joy. And that's exactly what we did in this game. So in terms of the lineup, I have no complaints. Wissa was dropping deep, Damsgaard was doing what Damsgaard does, and we held that width with Brian and Sharda. But whenever, and I think this is key, whenever we regain the ball in the middle third or in our defensive third, their midfielders were just a little bit lost. They didn't do a good job of tracking Damsgaard. Norgard was getting free. I was just so surprised to see us so high up the pitch at all times. And it's really going to come through in some of the screenshots that I picked out. So the first goal actually comes from their corner, which I think kind of explicates what I was just saying in terms of us being really, really quick when we turned over possession, getting the ball from back to front. So the corner comes in, Flecken gathers, and we've got Wissa who's in that deep line position. He pops it off to Aya, and there's a nice little bit of interplay. And this is what I love, what I haven't seen from Brentford, I don't think, in quite a long time, and maybe that's to do with the calibre of opposition we've been up against. But this kind of interplay when we've been kind of sandwiched into a corner of the pitch and we managed to get ourselves up. But this is what I mean, Damsgaard in the pockets of space where you need him to be. Aya pops it into Norgard. Norgard has a nice bit of play with Damsgaard on the edge. He pops it off to Wissa, who gets through West Ham's midfield far, far too easily. And then Brian's gone and Sharda's gone. This is the kind of trademark Brentford new style of play that we've been seeing this season. We get the ball in areas like this, we work it through our midfield, and then we've got the willing runners in Mbumo and Sharda. They know exactly when Wissa picks up the ball, Brian's gone. When Brian picks up the ball, Wissa's gone. And Sharda is the one that just has that blistering pace that can hurt any defence. But anyway, the ball comes over from Wissa, Brian gets that crucial flick, Sharda's initial shot gets saved, Brian follows it in, and then Sharda is there to tuck home the rebound. But again, it's a really, really well-worked goal, and this was one of many of these situations that happened throughout this first half. I just want to highlight, and people that are in the Brentford group chat on Twitter will know this screenshot because I sent it in. When you're in this position as a goalkeeper, it's probably not good. But Areola somehow manages to find himself in this position. Credit to him because he actually gets up and manages to make a save. Obviously, the ball's gone over the line by this point. But when you're in this position,
it was at this moment he knew he fucked up.
It's probably not a good sign. Second chance of the game comes about 3 minutes later, and this is highlighting our press. We're so far pushed up the pitch that we've got so many players in their half at this point because all the action is congested into this middle third. All of our defenders are pushed up. But this is what I love. Sepp Vandenberg tracking Mohamed Kudus all the way back, forcing him into an error, which leads to Christopher Aya picking up the ball there, intercepting it, laying it off to Brian Mbumo. He runs down the right, pops it back off into Christian Norgard. And when I was watching this, I was thinking, that's a free header in the middle. I think there's a little bit of confusion between Wissa and Damsgaard in terms of who actually is going to take this ball. But again, you're seeing the high press, you're seeing the ball in the middle area of the pitch, and you're seeing Brentford turn over possession and go from back to front or middle to front so quickly. The warning signs were there for West Ham. I'm surprised it took them until half-time to actually change it. Again, this comes from a West Ham throw-in. Look how many players are in the middle of the pitch here. And this is great. This is what we want. We've got the bodies. We've got the busyness of someone like a Mikkel Damsgaard. We've got the industrious presence of someone like a Christian Norgard, and that's exactly what happens in this clip. Schade gets the ball. We kind of get a little bit lucky with the 50-50s. Wissa ends up with it over here. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but Damsgaard feeds off the scraps. It breaks to Christian Norgard in midfield, and he's going to slot a perfectly weighted pass through that half space in between the centre half and the left back Emerson. And Bryan Mbeumo in this position, when he gets here, when he's just got Emerson to beat, and Dan touched on it on the podcast actually, can he start to vary his finishes? Because we've seen that finish quite a few times now. I'm thinking about the chance against Man City, the goal against Arsenal, where he's like cutting from the right, and he then tries to bend it in the near post. This time, he actually catches it so sweetly, but it's just a bit too close to Areola to actually trouble him. But again, alarm bells ringing for West Ham here, because we've gone from this position to a very high quality chance in basically next to no time. Another West Ham throw, this time it's Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and this leads to another high quality chance for Brentford. Sepp Vandenberg pushed up on Lucas Paqueta, forces him all the way back to Wan-Bissaka. He then tries an insane crossfield pass, trying to find Emerson on the left, I believe, with Bryan Mbeumo right there. This is a suicidal pass to be making. Graham Potter's head must be absolutely about to explode when he tries this pass. But then Bryan Mbeumo's in this position, and this 100%, if the last chance shouldn't have been 2-0, this 100% should have, because Wiss is there, but Damsgaard is the obvious ball. Damsgaard's the one that he's hoping to go towards, and the weight of pass is just slightly off. I mean, if he slides it into Damsgaard there, then that's like the biggest, highest quality XG chance you're going to get in the whole game. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's just a little bit overcooked from Bryan. It ends up going to Wissa, and the goal gets disallowed for offside. But again, you're seeing the ball get turned over in their defensive third / the middle third of the pitch, and you're seeing Brentford bodies everywhere. This sequence of clips highlights a duality to Brentford's game that I haven't seen too much of this season. We're happy to keep the ball. We're happy to do direct play through the midfield and bring our front line into play that way. And we wait for someone like a Wissa to pick it up on one of the bylines, or a Bryan to pick it up on one of the bylines, and then Schade and Mbeumo on their bikes. But this is what I like to see from Brentford in terms of having a little bit of patience and picking the right time to go direct. If this had been a goal, it would have been superb play all round. Aya has the ball, it gets recycled back to Nathan Collins. Flecken has a look. He decides not to use Vandenberg, not to use KLP. Sees Schade on his bike. Perfectly timed pass for Schade to run onto. He gets the flick, it drops to Bryan, and Wissa gets into a position where he has a shot on goal. And you're kind of expecting a player of Wissa's calibre, from what he's shown this season, you're kind of expecting him to hit the target because he's got so much space to run into. I think he shanks this one and it goes a little bit high and wide. But I like to see the variation. Like, we're not afraid of doing it two ways. We can do the intricate passing through midfield, but we can always mix it up and go long if we need to. And someone like Schade is brilliant in those situations. It's something that we've been missing in terms of having that direct outlet. And I'm surprised we didn't see more of that against the Spurs when it wasn't really working, just lumping it into the box all the time. But when Flecken has the ball and he sees Schade go, you know that he's going to win the flick, or you know that he's going to cause some sort of chaos, which leads to chances like this, where Bryan Mbeumo can pick it up, feed it into Wissa, and we have a shot on goal. This was a rare moment of West Ham actually doing some good work, but actually ends up being a massive, massive chance to Brentford. Sawyer picks up the ball just after I think we've had a counter-attack, and as you can see, we're so high up the pitch here. It's just like our pressing and our structure in this game was really, really positive to see, because it's like once we got the first goal, it's like, right, we're not resting on our laurels here. We need to get the second. We didn't end up getting the second, but I love to see how high we were up the pitch at all times. Anyway, Sawyer gets the break on Keane Lewis-Potter. He ends up just running out of steam a little bit. Apparently there was a clip there. I've watched it back a few times. If there was the slightest of touch on Sawyer, it was never anywhere near enough to knock him down. He probably just goes down because he can see the onrushing Vandenberg was about to take the ball from him. But Vandenberg picks it up, sees Damsgaard in a little bit of space. Shock. Damsgaard turns. Can he play the pass? It's Mikko Damsgaard. We know that he can play the pass. And Schade, on his weaker foot, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt with this one in terms of hitting the post. But again, that's a gilt-edge opportunity for Brentford to probably be 3-0 up at this point. This is where I think Graham Potter and also the players have to take a little bit of accountability as well. He will be so frustrated that when West Ham got into these promising positions, of which there were very, very few in this half, but when they did get into promising positions, they left Damsgaard with far too much space to operate. So when the second ball comes out here, when it goes past Norgard, Damsgaard and Alvarez, the distance between these two was just way too big. And this happened quite a few times. And Damsgaard gets the better of Alvarez, sets us up on an attack. And then you've got Bryan, Damsgaard, Wissa, KLP, absolutely lung-busting one to get forward. And you've got Norgard backing it up as well. But these are the kinds of promising situations that Brentford would get into from a promising situation from a West Ham perspective. And obviously there's a little bit on Graham Potter, whether if it had started with someone like Evan Ferguson, would these situations even be there? Because they'd be on the wing and they'd be trying to get the ball into the box. But also, Edson Alvarez, or Thomas Souček, they had to be tighter to Damsgaard in these situations because there were so many times where Damsgaard would pick up the ball or Vitali would pick up the ball and they've got space to run into because they've bypassed the midfield because everything's so congested that as soon as one little player gets free, in this case Damsgaard, and there's a little bit of space to run into, then we have got runners. And look at KLP here. He already knows that Damsgaard's going to get the better of Alvarez. This I want to highlight from Kevin Schade because this isn't something that I have really seen from him. And Thomas Frank actually said in his post-match interview that he's been training amazingly all week. So he wasn't really surprised by such a good performance on Saturday. But this kind of off-the-ball work, in terms of, I don't think he actually lost it in this instance, but this kind of off-the-ball work, defending from the front, stopping a player like Jarrod Bowen, who you know can hurt teams, stopping him from the front and starting our attacks from defending in their defensive third. He wins the ball back, gifts it off to KLP. And look at Thomas Frank here. This is why I highlighted this screenshot. Look at Thomas Frank. He's saying, let's go again. Let's not rest on this 1-0 lead. Let's get a second before half-time. KLP actually opts to go back to Flecken in this instance. And Thomas Frank's body language here, he's like, no, we had the chance there. We had the chance. We've got Kudus, Paqueta, Sawyer, Bowen all committed up the pitch. I think Thomas Frank is screaming for Nathan Collins to stay up, to give it back to Schade, or to work it in this situation because we've got 4 players out of the picture. He ends up going back to Flecken. And the chance comes to nothing. But I just love to see that kind of body language from Thomas Frank because he's not thinking, no, let's play it safe, let's keep possession. He's saying, no, let's go for the jugular, let's kill this game off. So this is the second goal that got disallowed. And just looking back through the full match replay, if this goal had gone in, it would have been our goal of the season so far because it's not even about it is to a large extent about the build-up play and the intricate tiki-taka between Janelt and Aya and Wissa in the box. But just check the time here, 39-41. This was built up. This was a built-up attack where we've recycled the ball from left to right, back to front, and managed to get into a goal-scoring situation. So Flecken has the ball. He works it out over to the right. Damsgaard picks it up here, pops it off back to Mbeumo. Then the ball gets recycled to the back line. It comes back out to KLP. He then fires it back across to Nathan Collins, who passing distribution on Saturday was absolutely immense, by the way. Knocks it in to Mikkel Damsgaard, who's picked up a little bit of space in the pockets. Where are the midfielders tracking him here? There are no midfielders tracking him here. He then plays it into Bryan Mbeumo. Vitali Janelt's the on-rushing midfielder coming from deep to pick up the ball here. And then just like the sheer amount of players we've got in West Ham's attacking third, like it's not something that I've really associated with Brentford this season in terms of having so many players high up the pitch and kind of really camping in the opposition's box or camping in the opposition's final third and making life difficult for them, making them it hard to breathe and just making it look impossible to get out. And this is exactly the kind of sequence of play that illustrates that. Vitali picks up the ball, twinkle toes past Souček. I wasn't familiar with your game, Vitali. Fair enough. That is some really nice, intricate attacking play that I'm not used to seeing from you. And I've got to give him his flowers because there are moments where he pops up with something like this. It's just, for me, they're not frequent enough. I caught on his heels a little bit in this situation. I think when I was watching this, I kind of knew it was offside anyway. Gets the touch back into Janelt. In this situation, has the awareness not to shoot, but then to lay it off to Wissa, and then Wissa slots it home. And that would have been an absolutely sensational goal if that had gone in. 39, go back to the time on the first one. The first screenshot I took from this, 39-41, and we don't end up getting the ball in the back of the net until 40-32. So, you know, this is a really nice passage of play from Brentford. Lots of passes, lots of movement, and a lot of being patient. But again, it's just like, I'm just surprised how easy it was for us. It was so easy. But these are the fine margins. Aya caught a little bit on his heels. If he anticipates Vitali getting past Souček, then maybe he gets in front of Kilman, and maybe we go 2-0 up at half-time. This was a chance, again, comes from a West Ham throw-in. I don't know what was going on with West Ham's throw-ins, but this is a chance for Brian right at the end of the half. I think Kevin Schade wins possession. It then comes to KLP, who's like on the halfway line at this point, and Brian's already gone. Pinpoint pass for Brian. And in this position, I'm not really sure why he takes it on the first touch, because he's got space to run into there. If he takes another touch, and we know that Brian's touch in terms of taking it into his stride and like applying that perfect touch so that he doesn't have to break stride and he continues with his momentum, we know he's so good at that. So I was surprised to see him take this first time, and he ends up shanking that wide. But honestly, from that first half, there's at least 4 goals in there that Brentford should have. And it was just so easy for us. And then this is the only like sequence of screenshots that I pulled from the second half, because it's the only one that I need to kind of really illustrate that. If West Ham had had another 45 potentially, playing the way that they did in the first half, then maybe we'd have had a different game. But Evan Ferguson comes on here and he's willing to run deep. He's willing to go on behind. If Jared Bowen pulls off this assist, by the way, it would have been the pre-assist of the season, because he juggles the ball about 3 or 4 times before releasing Evan Ferguson, and then Kudus has got the space because our defence is stretched. Because they've got the willing runner to go in behind and they've not got so many players in the congested midfield areas, you've got someone that's willing to do that kind of running in behind, then there's space for Kudus to come in, and then he has the chance to score, and he should be burying that. But what I also want to highlight is this touch from Nathan Collins to just elevate that ball and stick it up so that the ball is actually bouncing as it comes to Kudus here. Because if he doesn't get that touch, then I think it's a far more simple finish for for Mohamed Kudus to put away. But that touch there from Nathan Collins is superb. So good. And that's the end of the screenshots. I think in the rest of the game, we just defended so well. But just going back to the lineups, I think when Graham Potter released that lineup and you knew that Paqueta was going to like to come in deep and kind of feed off the scraps in midfield and see if he could bring Bowen into play, it just didn't work. It just did not work. And I was so surprised to see it from Graham Potter, because I just thought it would be a little bit more exciting and a little bit more kind of 2 evenly matched teams coming up against each other. But we just completely won that midfield battle. We had more legs in midfield. We had Damsgaard picking up pockets of space and causing havoc where he could. We had Wissa dropping deep and turning men. Souček and Alvarez just could not contain our front 3 at all. And then it gives Sharda free rein, and it gives Mbumo free rein, and it gives Wissa free rein to just wreak havoc on their defence. If they'd have stopped Damsgaard in this game, or if they'd have got tighter to him, or if they'd have man-marked him, or just somehow figured out a way to stop him from picking up the balls when there's been lengthy spells of possessions for both sides in this kind of middle third of the pitch, then I think it could have been a different game. And if they'd have had someone like Evan Ferguson up to really stretch it and force Vita back and force Norgard back, then maybe it could have been different. But he didn't. And in the second half, we defended so well. And I just want to highlight some of our defensive statistics. KLP got the man of the match on SofaScore, and fair enough, because he did such a great job of maintaining Jared Bowen throughout the whole game, whilst also providing an attacking threat down the left. 6 out of 9 duels won, 4 out of 7 ground duels won, 2 out of 2 aerials won, 82% passing accuracy, 2 tackles. He was outstanding. And I think we might need to have a conversation about Keane Lewis-Potter. And I'd be really interested to know what you guys think in the comments about where he kind of, or just that whole thing with Rico coming back. Because I'm not seeing Rico coming back and it being easy for him to get back into the team, just because of how well Lewis-Potter has acquitted himself in this left-back role. But what I will say is that it will be bloody nice to actually finally have some depth in that position if Rico Henry does eventually come back. Again, Nathan Collins, just Rolls Royce of a defender. So good. Finally starting to get a bit of recognition. There's this clip that's been doing the rounds on Twitter of like a compilation of his game. None the Wig, who's a bit of a nutcase football fan if you follow him at all, saying Nathan Collins is one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League. And I saw this tweet from someone, Talk CPFC, who's really great around Palace and around football in general. But he said, I've realised that every team in the Premier League thinks they have a top 3 centre-back in the league, every single one. And it is kind of true, because like if it wasn't Ethan Pinnock last season, then it is Nathan Collins this season. And I do think maybe in the Premier League in general, the dilution of quality in terms of a position, I do think at centre-back is very, very high. You know, you've got your stalwarts like your Gabriels, your Van Dijks, your Salibas. The Liverpool and Arsenal defenders are maybe a cut above the rest. But then you've got players like Zabarnyi, you've got Milenkovic and Murillo at Forest. You've got Howson at Bournemouth as well as Zabarnyi. You've got Mark Gay at Palace. You've got Jared Branthwaite at Everton. I just think the quality of that position in general this season has been very, very high. But listen, I'm not taking anything away from Nathan Collins, because I've watched a lot of Premier League football this season. And genuinely, for a team that has, I think, the second worst defensive record in the league, he doesn't deserve to have that kind of defensive record at all, because I can't remember, and let me know if you can, but I cannot remember the last time he had a bad game this season. And yes, he had a few clangers last season, granted, but this season in particular, he has just been absolutely immense. And Dan and Craig pointed it out on the podcast. If Mikael Damsgaard hadn't have been having the season that he has, then I do think someone like Nathan Collins, and obviously Brian Mbeumo is the massive caveat as well, but someone like Nathan Collins would definitely be up there to be one of our players of the season, if not our player of the season this year. So just another Beckenbauer-esque performance from Nathan Collins. Sad to see Sepp van den Berg go off injured, but I thought Ethan Pinnock in the second half came on and didn't step a foot wrong. Really hoping he can just slot back in, because the Sepp van den Berg injury looked relatively serious. I'm hoping it's not going to be too long, because I do think that partnership between Collins and van den Berg, I don't think we've looked more solid this season with the centre-back partnership. And obviously that's in part because of Ethan Pinnock's faltering form this season, but you know, he came back in on Saturday and he didn't look out of place whatsoever. So it's looking good. It's looking really, really good for Brentford. Hopefully we've got a chance to kind of turn our home form back around on its head. We've got the game against Leicester on Friday night, which should be a routine win. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that full-time analysis show. A little bit different to the ones I've been doing previously. I just feel like there was enough in that first half for me to really pick at and go at and try and analyse and just try and kind of explain just how wrong Graham Potter got it and how right Thomas Frank got it, and how much it was just so nice to see us so willing to go for that second goal, third goal, fourth goal in the first half. And like the fact that we only came away with a 1-0 win really, really does flatter West Ham, because if it was 4, it would have been a fair and correct result for me. So yeah, really positive. The West Ham fans saying we should be beating teams like Brentford. Look at your record against us and maybe next season reconsider, because in terms of teams we played in the Premier League since we came up 4 seasons ago, West Ham have been the one where you look at it and you go, well, that's a guaranteed 3 points, bar maybe Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. But, you know, West Ham fans, I can't really imagine what it's like to be a West Ham fan at the moment. They kind of oscillated from a new style under Lopetegui to another new style under Graham Potter. They've got all of Lopetegui's players in, so it was never going to be an easy fix for Graham Potter. But having said that, you know, in the build-up to the game against Brentford on Saturday, by and large, I think the performances had been there. And on Saturday, it really, really wasn't. So it must be difficult for them to take. It must be difficult for them to take, because a team like Brentford, who are like half the size, half the history, half the stadium, whatever you want to say, for them to be consistently beating you in pretty convincing ways like we did on Saturday, yeah, it must hurt. But I hope you've enjoyed that full-time analysis show. Remember to smash the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also, go check out the Eden Road podcast episode. The link for that video will be in the description of this one. Let me know what you thought of the West Ham game. Let me know who your standout performers were. And I will catch you on the next video.